Have you ever set yourself a New Year's goal or resolution only for it to fail at the first hurdle? Maybe you have the right intentions, but aren't sure how to train your brain to commit to a new habit. Let's chat about that with psychology consultant Dr. Joe Lukens for the first time in 2025. Hello.
Hello, Phil. Happy New Year to you and all the listeners.
Yes, Happy New Year to you as well. Let's not so much talk about resolutions. Let's talk about forming habits. What happens in our brains when we try to change an old habit?
Yes, it gets very tricky for our poor old brains because we send them into something of a neurological tug of war, if you like, because where our automated behaviour sits is controlled by an area of our brain called the basal ganglia. And so all those things that we do automatically, we've all done them this morning. We've brushed our teeth, we've had a cup of tea, we've maybe gone for a drive in the car and put our seatbelt on. Much of that is controlled in the area of the brain called the basal ganglia. Of course, when we then decide to change a habit, and this is, as you said, an optimal time of the year when people are often thinking about this, the decision-making around that happens in the front of our brain, in the prefrontal cortex. We send our brains into a little bit of a spin because we're so used to doing things by habit, and then we're trying to change them, which is a much more conscious process.
How long does it take to form a habit?
Great question. And if you go into the bookstores, you'll see there's all sorts of promises about what you can do in 28 days and so forth. It's a bit of a sit on the fence answer. It takes as long as it takes. So for some people, you might get medical news and need to change, say, your dietary habits, and some people can do that immediately because it's an important change that someone needs to make. Other people might make promises to themselves they're going to change a habit, and they might be 2, 3, 4, 10 years down the track and still not change their behaviours. So there's no set time for that, but we do know if you put a little bit of conscious thought into it, changing habits becomes a little bit easier.
What is the habit loop?
Yeah, the habit loop. So this is, if you understand the habit loop, it really sets you up well for creating new habits or changing old ones. And that's understanding that behaviour comes about because there'll be some sort of cue. So let's go with an easy one. You get into your car, that's the cue. And then you've got the routine itself, which is where you then hopefully pop your seatbelt on and you hear the click of the seatbelt. And then you get the reward of feeling safe and knowing you're not going to get in trouble for not wearing your seatbelt. So there's always 3 aspects to creating a habit. Something will prompt us or make us think about it. Then there'll be the behaviour, and then there'll be the reward. So if we understand how those 3 things relate to each other, then when we want to change behaviours, we just need to work on those 3 aspects.
I'm chatting with psychology expert Dr. Joe Lukens about setting some new habits for 2025. Let's not call them resolutions. Let's call them new habits. Why is willpower not enough to change our habits?
Oh, I wish it was, but unfortunately for us, our willpower is very much a limited resource. So we know it becomes depleted during the course of the day, which is why it's much easier to break a habit later in the afternoon, or particularly maybe after dinner when we're watching TV. It's much easier to break a habit at that time of the day. So if we only rely on willpower, then we are setting ourselves up for failure because we can't maintain the constant vigilance that's needed for our habits. So we can't always have willpower, so we need to be motivated, and we're not always going to feel motivated, and that's why habits really set us up well for success.
Can you give us some tips on how to start and maintain a habit if willpower is not enough?
Yes. So I think the first thing is to understand it is something of a conscious process. So monitoring, and I would always say to someone who's looking to change a behaviour, like maybe they might say, I want to exercise more. I'd ask them to look in the mirror and be very kind to themselves and say, why haven't you been doing that so far? We haven't been doing it for a reason. Understanding that, what are the barriers? What are the things that are going to get in our way? What will success look like? So if we are exercising more, as an example, when? How are we going to do that? At what time of the day? Who are we going to do it with? So it does require a fair bit of planning, and also keeping track of our progress and our successes is also helpful. So some people like to write it down or to keep a little bit of a journal. And I'd always say to people to be patient and persistent in changing habits. It does take time, and to understand that every expert was once a beginner.
A lot of people give up at the first hurdle. What happens if you do fail at the beginning?
Forgive yourself is the first thing that you need to do, is understanding that changing behaviour isn't always easy. So if something's gone awry and you haven't got up and gone for that walk, or or you chose a different food option than what you wanted to, is just to maybe, as I said before, look in the mirror but do it in a kind way. And that, well, why did that come about in the way that it did? Reflecting on it is important, and then helping yourself to think about what would it look like, what do I maybe need to change to set myself up for success moving forward.
Dr. Jo, thank you for chatting with us. All the best for 2025, and we will chat with you again soon.
Sounds good, Phil. All the best to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jo Lukens there talking about forming habits, healthy habits for 2025.